So welcome everyone to TAPP Talk Live number 52. Here we are in Malta, and we are normally live Monday to Friday at 10 o'clock. And this morning for European Sustainable Development Week, we are talking to Manya Russo from Zibel, who is going to tell us about addressing the problem of microplastics in our beaches and on our coastline. Good morning, Manya. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Phil.
And you're live on the road today, so you're out and about. And thank you for stopping to do this live session today. So if you've joined us online live, you could ask questions in the comment box below, and we'll be able to come to those through the show. And you can ask those on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And if you're catching the recording, you can see that we are live from Monday to Friday at 10 a.m., just like the page on whatever platform you're on. And also you can ask questions, and I'll be able to get those to Manya afterwards. But you'll see her contact details later on. So Manya, we're talking about microplastics then. So what are they, and why are they an issue?
So microplastics there are two main sources of microplastics. They can either be the breakdown, or rather the product of larger bits of plastic breaking down. And this usually happens through wave action, sunlight, so UV. So this degradation happens because larger pieces of plastic are breaking down into smaller ones in the natural environment. The next type of microplastic, which is commonly found, is the raw pellets that are used to create plastic. So they're essentially manufactured, they're perfectly smooth, small pieces of plastic that can be found in our natural environment as well, but don't come through degradation, but are actually in fragments already from source. And also, actually, one more type is the plastic, which is in small pieces already, that finds its way into the natural environment, that is found in, for example, exfoliating creams and all these toiletries that have small pieces of plastic found within them already. So essentially, microplastics either get formed in the natural environment from larger pieces or end up in the natural environment from source, and they're already in very small pieces.
So the ones that are in very small pieces, are they being transported from one place to another in plastic manufacturing, and that's how they get into the system?
Yes, that is exactly right. So the ones that are perfect pellets, so what are actually called nurdles, these pieces, these raw, they're perfectly formed beads. When you're at a cleanup or when you're finding microplastics in the natural environment, you can tell them apart from the ones that have come from degraded plastic in the environment. They're perfectly round, very smooth. And these again are called nurdles, and these are the raw product for creating plastic at a manufacturing level.
And can you normally see these with the naked eye?
Yes, so microplastics do vary in size, but we can see quite a lot of them with the naked eye as well.
Wow, okay. So what about in Malta then? What research have you been involved in about microplastics in Malta?
So in Malta, essentially, so just to give you maybe a bit of background, so Zibel essentially have been doing cleanups for a long time, and we've been around for over 5 years now. This is actually our 5th-year anniversary as an organization. And essentially, when we're doing cleanups, obviously, I mean, microplastics has been something that has been talked about for a very long time from other NGOs abroad. And of course, when we're doing our cleanups, we did realize that there was a lot of microplastics through a collaboration with other entities. So we had a project called Project Impact, which we closed off last year, or rather at the beginning of this year, we closed it off. And this was a collaboration between Zibel, MCAST, and Aquabiotech Group. So as we were three entities from very different sectors, which came together and did a research project to look at microplastic hotspots around Malta. We found, not just through our cleanups, but also through this project, that microplastics are found everywhere. So there's every single beach, every single environment in Malta, along the coastline, you find microplastics, whether it be it in the water column or be it within sediment. Sediment, I mean on sand, for example, or on a rocky beach, or even on the seabed. So within actually the habitats, the marine habitats themselves. So they are found everywhere. And obviously we realize that this is not a problem which is elsewhere, it's here as well. The nature of microplastics make them quite difficult to research as well, because they move around, and sometimes even when you think you've found the potential hotspot, or you would have found a place where they're accumulating, it's not just down to a close pollutant source. It could also be that there are ocean currents that are bringing them to one particular spot. So it's very difficult sometimes to act, even if you have the information about where the microplastics are. Trying to address that issue is quite problematic, because the microplastics that we have here, and even the plastic we have here in Malta, comes from other countries as well. So it's not a Malta problem, it's a global problem. And this is something that I really want to pronounce, that this isn't something that we do just to take care of our own coastline, but it's about a global environmental hazard at this point. And also, again, it is very important to understand that once microplastics are in the environment, removing them, or actually understanding the extent on how far they've gotten into the environment, is very difficult. So addressing this problem means addressing it at source, not having plastic ending up in the ocean, having no toiletries not using these microbeads. So it's from the producers side where this problem, and obviously the consumer as well.
Yes, I was going to ask you, how can consumers help by taking some kind of action on this? I mean, I guess when you put your hand in the sand on the beach, you find microplastics. So that's one
Yes.
little piece of consumer research that can be done, because you can really see it, can't you?
Yes, of course, definitely, and that's why back to what we were talking about earlier. They are everywhere. So it's really sad. For example, when we are, even if at the beginning of summer, a lot of beaches accumulate with this old. Basically seagrass. It's Posidonia banquets, essentially. So these areas which become full of what people call seaweed, that is kind of just dried up and washed up on shore. If you go and look at that, it is coated in microplastics. And this is literally seagrasses which
Really?
have just washed up from the sea. So you can tell how much it has become ingrained into the natural environment, to the point where it's not anymore something that we can say, oh, we can remove. Microplastics will never be able to be removed fully from the marine environment at this point. It is now starting from, again, the consumer responsibility and the producer responsibility to not have plastics in our lives as much as possible. And even if we have certain types of plastics, that they don't find their way into the sea and into the natural environment. So back to your question, I think as consumers we do have a big responsibility, and there are actually lots of options out there. First of all, we need to change our mindset. We can't keep thinking in a way of, oh, what will one plastic bag make a difference, or what will me changing my facial wash make a difference? Yes, it does make a difference. Every single action that we take to address this problem is going to help in the final result. It's going to help in avoiding this problem getting worse. So as a consumer, I would always tell people to avoid anything with microbeads in it. So again, these facial washes
Okay.
that people tend to use, these exfoliants, there are natural exfoliants. There are some products that use salt and sugar. These are much better. So if you still want to exfoliate, just look for the things that have the natural exfoliants in them. So that would be one thing. Another thing is, obviously now, thankfully, Malta has a single-use plastic strategy which has been released. So follow the guidelines. Do not as much as possible, do not ask for plastic products when you go to a food and beverage provider, because now they are going to become a limitation. So in a way, we are being, and it's a positive thing, but we are being obliged to have less plastic in our life, which is a very positive thing. And
Yes.
of course, if you are a business owner, if you are someone who owns an office or runs an office, let's start thinking about bringing these alternatives in, or removing these products all together. Again, it goes down through your supply chain. There's lots of places where plastic becomes part of our supply chain. So let's really look into how we can change the status quo, essentially. So we do have to change the way that we work. We do have to change the way that we think. But if we don't, the result, or rather the impact that will have, is worse than having to change habits and having to change the way we run businesses these days.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting that you mentioned about the businesses. We've talked about sort of plastic-free offices and stuff like that, because then that has an effect with people at home, because they start doing it at work and then they can take that initiative a little bit home as well. So it works both ways. If they've started at home, they can bring it into the office. So we've talked about with a couple of companies in particular, where they're trying to make sustainability go through the whole organisation as part of the business purpose. So what about the research then? I mean, obviously the research that was done, that impact project, did that take a long time?
Not really. So we were limited in basically the requirements within the fund that we applied for. So we had a certain number of months to run this project. And in fact, I do want to caveat that project impact results were based on a couple of months of carrying out microplastic surveys. It is not the full picture. And it is something we caveat in the science as well, that this is, it was done between a period of March to July, I believe. So it is very much based on one season. But what we found was that microplastics are everywhere, but they're not everywhere in a homogeneous way. So it does, the levels change from one location to the next. So essentially, the project split up Malta and Gozo into 21 zones. The good thing, which is something as other countries don't have, is that we can actually survey the whole country in one effort, rather than, if you lived in Croatia, if you lived in, in Italy, you wouldn't be able to do that. But we're lucky enough to be able to do a project which looks at the whole of all of the Maltese islands. So we split up Malta into 21 zones. Each zone was sampled using a manta net, which is essentially a net that is dragged behind a boat at a very slow pace to collect samples at the surface, on the surface of the water. So it kind of sits in between the very top of the water and slightly below it. And basically what is collected was then analyzed to look at the size, the type, the color, the shape of the microplastic. And then we took it one step further into the chemical analysis, where we understood what the plastic would have, what is the type of plastic, the actual type of plastic. So through this project, and again, if anyone is interested, please get in touch with me. I can share our reports and our findings with people who are interested to understand a little bit more into the sciencey bit. Yep, there's my email address. So please, I'm more than happy to talk microplastics with anyone that's interested to. Yes, and essentially this just to give in a nutshell what our findings were, we found that the highest concentration of microplastics was found within the Grand Harbour area, so it's the area close to Valletta, essentially in the Grand Harbour of Valletta, and in the Imjar Harbour. Again, not a big surprise, but we did think that, for example, areas like Bujibba, Aura, Slima would have more than we found. But you have to also keep in mind that even although there's lots of anthropogenic activity happening there, so lots of obviously tourism and lots of activity happening on the coastline, because microplastics move, the shape of the bay and the way that the bay is whether it's very enclosed or not will make a difference on these results. And that is why we believe that in the Grand Harbour there is a higher concentration, because it is very enclosed. So the microplastics don't move out as much. So that is why I say, even although our microplastic hotspot map helped us to make certain inferences about microplastics, it does not paint the full picture, and it doesn't allow us to really pinpoint the industries that we need to work with to improve the situation.
Okay. So now that we know these type of things on a sort of wider scale, how does research help us address the problem?
Well, when it's research, of course, gives you the data, and you we can't make. I think it's important to never make decisions without being well informed about what you're making a decision on in the first place. I mean, I'm a scientist by nature, so I like data. I like having information. I'm curious by nature, so I think for me the research plays a very important part in not just making decisions from a consumer point of view, but even policy. Thankfully, again, the authorities and Zibel, we work quite closely together. We share a lot of our data, and we know that that data is helping to inform policymakers on their strategies, on making certain decisions. So, yes, research plays a crucial part in being able to not just address a problem, but then also be able to come up with solutions and come up with new technologies, new ways of monitoring it. Without that baseline, we are essentially fumbling in the dark, and we're making assumptions about things without being able to have a strong basis behind it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about Zibel as an organisation. It's not just the research that you're trying to do. You are actually doing something.
Yes,
So,
yes,
what actions do you want to tell us about what actions Zibel do in a season or on the year?
yes. Yes, of course. So yes, so Zipel is actually an organization which has been, like I said, for the last 5 years running cleanups. I think we've become very good at our marine cleanups specifically. There are lots of organizations out there that do cleanups too. So of course, hats off to everyone that plays their part in this fight against litter in the natural environment. But in the case of Zibel, I think we have a very large, again, we've built up a certain capacity where we can carry out large scale marine cleanups. We do this all year round. I think the only months that we stop are January and February because of storms and because of bad weather. So of course, because again, our cleanups are water based, so weather and choppy seas make a difference. And essentially, aside from doing cleanups, we don't just collect the debris and what we find, but we separate it, we weigh it out, and Phil, I think you remember the kind of extra work that
Absolutely.
we go through. Yes, when the rubbish has actually come back on land. And once we've measured everything, and once we've taken out down all that data, we also send it to different waste streams. So it doesn't all go to landfill. We actually have a partnership with a company called Odyssey Innovation, and they are essentially taking our marine plastics and making new products with them. So this is something that I think our motto as Zibel is our motto is it starts with you, but our pillars are very much around having waste be looked upon as a resource and not as rubbish. These materials, these products can give you new things. They have a second life to them in most cases. Same thing with fishing nets, for example. We find fishing gear which can be salvaged or can be created into new products. So one thing that we really, really strive to do is that we don't just collect and throw away. We collect and do as much as we can for these products to become for this waste to become a resource for something else. In terms of people, being involved in this, we have cleanups all year round. We do tend to announce the date and location a little bit close to the time. So, if people are interested in coming to a cleanup, sometimes they ask me, when is the next one? And I always say, I don't know. Stay tuned, stay on our pages, on our socials, and you will find out probably a week before. But the reason is that, again, conditions are a very big factor of where we do our cleanup. So we usually have our team going down and scoping the area, that's the diving area. And also we have our trailer. We come with a lot of baggage, so we need space to put our things everywhere. And that usually requires permits and all these things. So yes, we are active almost all year round. And aside from marine cleanups, we're also very keen to look at collaborations to do other projects, to do things related to education, to public awareness. So our doors are wide open. And we really, really ask for people to engage with us, even with any ideas they may have or any ways that they want to get their family, their company, their whatever involved. we really, really do want our organization to not just be a standalone, but be, in a way, a catalyst for community mobilization. We want to mobilize Maltese people to really see this issue and work towards improving it.
So companies can also contact you to arrange sort of ESG type activities, so that
Yes,
you
of
can help
course.
them arrange a cleanup. But what I found fascinating when I did some of a few, I've only done a few cleanups with you, but what I found fascinating was the combination between divers, snorkelers, land,
Yes.
boat, the whole works. And it also gets really quite exciting because it's not just the small plastic bottles and all sorts of batteries and all sorts of strange things you find. Suddenly you've been in the water for a bit and you come out on shore and someone's offloading an engine
Yes, yeah. Or a
or
car or
something.
a boat.
Or a car, yes, just all sorts of things, and it's fascinating. So yes, if anyone who's listening to the recording on this is interested in doing cleanups, do contact Zibel, and also look for them on social media, and you'll see all the dates of the events.
Yes.
They're great fun,
And actually
and
back.
they do something.
Yes, and to your point, anyone is invited. You don't have to be a diver, you don't have to even be a swimmer. We need hands on deck across the board. So please, even if you want to come with your kids, we get families coming, and it's really sweet because you see like 4 or 5 year olds sorting plastic, and it's literally anyone can come, and anyone is more than welcome and is needed. So
Yes, and you can come for a bit or the whole
yeah,
session or all sorts.
yes,
It's very fluid, and that made it great, I think.
great.
So Manya, what about the future for microplastics then, or let's say the future for microplastics research? What does the future hold for trying to address the problem?
Well, for sure. And again, I feel like the world is moving in that direction. We need to stop plastic getting into the environment from source. So the future of microplastics is not addressing the end problem, but it's addressing the start. It's addressing them getting into the environment in the first place. I also think that more research is needed for sure. It would be amazing to see innovation where microplastics can be removed from the marine environment without having repercussions on the marine environment directly. So, the same way that we see these big, like the ocean cleanup, the big ocean cleanup, where you have these big trawlers carrying, collecting floating marine debris in the garbage patches around the world, in the Pacific garbage patch and all that. This is a very good way to address the problem, to actually do cleanups and keep on picking it all up. But I believe that the future of plastics and the future of microplastics and removing them from the marine environment is to really address the source, to change
Right.
the way that we operate. Research is still needed again, because unfortunately at this rate we need to understand how far have microplastics worked their way into our natural environment. And unfortunately we see some very scary research coming out of saying plastic is found in our table salt, in our drinking water, in beer. It's found everywhere, in shellfish. And there were some scary statistics of the potential quantity of plastic that one average person consumes in a year. So again, we need to think that plastics are toxic. So we can't take this lightly. We can't think, oh, it's okay, it's just gonna sit in my belly, or it's not gonna. No, it will actually have a big, big impact on our human health. Which is why when people, I get very kind of, I would say, very annoyed when people say, oh, this is environmental activism. No, it's not just that. We're talking about big, big health problems in the future. We're talking about big environmental impacts in the future, which affect our food chains, which affect our water supply. So let's not just think about this as environmental activism and something that only young people do. No, this is a problem we need to address, and this is a crisis which in the future will affect us. So we really, really do need to see more importance, more money, more policy change being directed to address this.
And the research gives us the data, but it's still
Yeah,
really sounds to be up to the consumer to not use the products. It rather than relying on the producers to stop producing the products. If the consumers stop using the products in the first place, then the producers will stop producing them
exactly. Exactly.
because they're not needed.
Yes.
The
And
power is really in the hands of the consumer to make
that's,
these changes.
I mean, it goes both ways, but I do believe that the most influence you can have as a consumer is where you spend your money, is where you put your money.
Right.
So this is our power as consumers. We are, most people out there are not producers themselves. So as a consumer, where you put your money is where you are putting your, it's where you are going to have the most influence and the most impact. So let's make those smarter decisions when we spend our money. Let's make those smarter decisions when we decide to purchase something, where when we decide to invest in something. Same thing with companies. Again, if you are in an office and you can be the voice of reason and tell them, oh, let's remove those plastic bottles, or let's do for our next team event, let's have a plastic free lunch, or so it comes from those individuals that are influential that drives those change. So it's not just
Absolutely.
where you spend your money, but it's also what you say, what influence you have. I think that's also very important.
We all have voice and an
Yes.
action or
Yes,
that we can do, can't we? And a responsibility.
of course, a big
So
responsibility.
yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Manya, for coming along today on your busy day. It's great. I have certainly learned some things about Zibel that I didn't know, which is great, and certainly learned something about how much research there has been in Malta on microplastics. So I'm very grateful. Thank you very much for coming along. I'm just going to play us out with a little bit of music, and thank you.